Hello, everyone. This is our first introductory lecture, and I just want to talk about what philosophy is. If this is your first philosophy class, the word might seem kind of nebulous, mysterious, and very old, and that is kind of true. As you can see on the screen, I have the word broken into two parts. Philosophy is an ancient Greek word from about 25 to 2700 years ago. It's a combination of the words philo, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. So philosophy is the love of wisdom, and of course, we have lots of questions right off the bat. What is wisdom? What does it mean to love wisdom? And throughout history, different philosophers are going to have different ideas of what that is. Some philosophers are going to say that wisdom is transcendent, that it is something that is over and above our regular experience of the world. Some philosophers are going to say almost the opposite. They're going to say that wisdom is deeper engagement with the truths of our experience of the world as we live it. And then we're going to see all kinds of things in between. Our first question, though, after trying to figure out what wisdom is, might be just to ask, well, why do people do this, right? What leads people to philosophize? When we start asking difficult questions about our understanding of reality, about how we relate to reality, oftentimes it arises as a sort of crisis or as a result of a crisis. You might have had situations like this in your own life where you are confronting a difficult situation, some family issue, or you are, I don't know, engaging with politics or engaging with institutions and finding that the way those institutions or the way your family engagements are working just isn't sufficient, that it feels wrong maybe, or that there's some contradiction in the way that people are understanding things or the way that you're understanding things. And oftentimes that leads us to start asking really difficult questions, maybe sort of having crises of faith or having uh, ideas about how things could be better or how they could be different. And we can see that sort of thing playing out throughout the history of philosophy. So again, philosophy in the West started about 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece, during a time that some historians will call the Axial Age. The Axial Age is around 800 to 400 BC, and it's a time period where all over the world, not just in the West, in Europe, but all over the world, people were starting to reevaluate the old ways of understanding that they had inherited. For thousands of years, people had been sharing mythologies, talking about gods, talking about how you properly appease a god, how you have a relationship with a god. So these mythologies proliferated for a very long time. But at some point, something happened that led people to stop trusting those myths as easily as their ancestors had. There's a lot of factors that play into this. I like to point to evolutions in information, evolutions in communication, and evolutions in language as a part of this. What happened shortly before 800 BC all over the world? Well, the invention of written language started to become more and more prevalent, right? I have here examples from Greece. The Phoenician alphabet had been introduced to Greece of around 900 BCE, and slowly, they started writing their myths down. They started reading them. They started repeating them, and then they started to realize, wait a minute, we have this myth about Zeus that we are sharing with the entire world. We're trying to save it forever. But do we really want Zeus to be the exemplar of righteousness or goodness or how to properly exert power? Maybe not. If you know anything about Greek mythology, you probably know Zeus is kind of a bastard, isn't he? Constantly cheating on his wife, killing people for funsies. Overall, not that great of a guy. So people start to ask questions. Socrates, we'll see a lot from Socrates this semester. Socrates is often considered the founder of Western philosophy. And he started to ask questions and develop a method for trying to find truth that wasn't just dependent on the authority of religious scholars or teachers or old faith. Plato, his student, recorded a lot of the conversations that Socrates had. We know about Socrates largely because of Plato. And Plato, extremely influential. Our first reading is from him. Plato sometimes is called, again, the father of Western philosophy. And there's a famous quote, I forget who said it, it might have been Bertrand Russell, said that all of philosophy is a footnote to Plato. We wouldn't have philosophy the way we do if not for Plato. And then Aristotle is Plato's student. And Aristotle is the inventor of a lot of the logic that we're going to see in this class. I have a video in the logic module for this week talking about Aristotle's logic. So again, crisis and huge evolution in the way that people communicate led to Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and lots of others starting to question things. A next big step in the history of Western philosophy is about 600 years ago, 600 to 800 years ago, the scientific revolution took off. All of a sudden, people are starting to evaluate things in a way that, again, is just not based on the 1500-year-long history of Roman Catholicism, of the Christian church sort of running everything. Well, what led to the scientific revolution? Again, if we look at the history of information revolutions, a very early thing that happened before the Renaissance, before the scientific revolution, was the invention of the printing press. The printing press was invented in the 1400s, and all of a sudden, instead of all of the information, all of the texts being handwritten painstakingly over weeks, months, years, and then made one at a time, all of a sudden people were able to make identical copies of texts and distribute them far and wide throughout all of Europe. One of the first things that gets printed on the printing press is Martin Luther, the old one, not the new and improved, the old German Martin Luther, and he printed his objections to the Catholic Church. This spurred the Protestant Reformation and also spurred, again, science. Before the printing press, scientists were largely independent wizards or witches who would sort of do their own secret experiments in private. They didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. After the printing press, all of a sudden they could put their methods down. They could share what they were doing and spread it far and wide, and people could try and replicate. Right? Science depended on open source sharing of the methods that the early scientists were using. This led to, again, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and modernity. We have a reading in this intro module from Descartes as well. Descartes is giving us his method of doubt. His idea is that all of the ideas that we had before need to be questioned. We need to find out if there's anything in our experience or our knowledge of the world that is 100% certain. So his task is going to be to eliminate everything that there is a possible reason to doubt from his entire worldview, and then break it down to see if there's anything that he can say, yes, I know this for certain. We're just focused on his first meditation, his method of doubt. For now, we'll see some of his other stuff later on in this semester. And you see some other names of what are called modern philosophers. That's basically the 1600s through the late 1700s. And then finally, we get to the contemporary world. Again, another crisis. So if we're talking about information revolutions, the invention of writing, the invention of the printing press, what are the information revolutions that led to the contemporary world, to the world that we're in? Well, if we see the sort of frequency of information revolutions playing out through time, obviously spoken language was invented thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago. Written language was invented around 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago and slowly developed. And then it took another 1,500 or 2,000 years before the printing press gets invented. After the printing press gets invented and science takes off and enlightenment takes off, all of a sudden in the 1800s, information revolutions start coming with much, much more frequency. Right? So we get the invention of recording. Right? All of a sudden, people are able to record audio. Photography happens. The invention of the radio, the invention of film, right? Movies. And then the invention of television happens. And then the invention of what? Contemporary media happens. Um, all of that happens between the early 1800s and the start of the 20th century, and it starts taking off. And during that time in the 1800s, people like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Karl Marx start to, again, question, right? The ways of understanding that the Enlightenment and that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle had given to these people was just not sufficient anymore. They saw new problems arising, and the tools they had been given were not sufficient to understand and engage with these new ways of engaging with reality. So again, contemporary philosophy, 19th, 20th, and 21st century philosophy arises from these information revolutions. And again, you see some names there. We'll run into a few of these names as we go through the class, not all of them. What I want us to think about here is what kind of crisis might we be in now? Again, if we see information revolutions spurring critical thinking and philosophy throughout time, where are we now? Well, I sometimes say we're in the middle of the fifth great information revolution. Again, it's spoken language, written language, the printing press, and then all of those other smaller information revolutions, radio, television, telephones, etc. Now we have the fifth one, the internet. We're in the middle of a great information revolution. And the crucial thing to remember for us as we go through is that all of these times, the axial age, the Enlightenment, industrialization, these people were struggling to figure out how to understand their role in the world and how to engage with it. But none of them really knew exactly what was going to work, where we were going to go, what was going to happen. Some of them got lucky, right? Some of them were very clever, saw the threads of history and the way they were all coming together, and they were able to sort of project into the future and into their present what was really going on. But nobody read Kierkegaard or Nietzsche when they were alive, right? Very few people were reading Marx, right? It took time for people to start to recognize, oh, this guy kind of did know what was going on. He could see what was happening, or she could see. There are definitely women philosophers. Unfortunately, a lot of them got erased over time, or at least got published under the name of their male counterparts. Again, nobody really knows what this information revolution is going to lead us to. This is exactly why being able to critically evaluate and think really well through all of the different elements of our reality as we experience it is so crucial right now, because we have to be able to roll with the punches, and we also have to be able to respond to all the weird stuff that's happening as a result of this information revolution. All right, we're almost done. I just want us to go through some of the traditional branches of philosophy so that we have some crucial terminology in our head as we go through the class. There are four main branches of philosophy. The first one is called metaphysics. Metaphysics means theories of reality. What's fundamentally real? One theory of reality might include something like a God. Why is this not working? Come on. Is there a God, right? If there is such a thing as an all-powerful, all-knowing being who sort of runs everything, controls everything, or created everything, that's going to have certain consequences for the way we understand reality, obviously, right? How do we understand morality if there's an all-powerful, all-knowing being that is guiding everything and then sort of created us? Another metaphysical position might be something like materialism. This is a graphical representation of the entire history of the universe according to contemporary physics. You can see on the left side here, that's the Big Bang. This is the expansion of the universe through time. And then here we are somewhere in here in the present. If this is your theory of reality, that everything is sort of collections of matter and energy interacting with each other, bouncing around, combining, breaking apart, recombining building structures. If that's your theory of reality, that's also going to have very serious consequences for the way you understand your role and your engagement with truth and with reality. Lots of other metaphysical questions arise, smaller ones like the question of whether humans have free will is a metaphysical question. Is there a human nature is a metaphysical question. Again, it's a question of what's fundamentally real. What does it mean to be a human, right? What is a human is a metaphysical question. All right. The next branch of philosophy is epistemology. This is what our primary focus in this class is going to be. Epistemology means theories of knowledge. How do we know things? How do we evaluate truth? Is there such a thing as truth? That's more in the realm of metaphysics. But we can see how these interact with each other, right? How do we know things? Do we use logic, right? Logic comes in a variety of forms. You see these symbols here. That's a very actual simple representation of logical relationships, formal logical relationships in the style of Aristotle's philosophy. If it looks confusing, don't worry. You will understand exactly what that means by the end of this class. It's, again, not very complicated. But basically what logic does is it shows the formal relationships between ideas. If I say something like, if somebody is human, then they are mortal, I'm proposing a certain logical relationship between being human and being mortal. And then I can follow through on that logical relationship to draw conclusions. We might also say that knowledge comes from observation, right? Science gives us a certain kind of knowledge. And again, the scientific revolution led to brand new concepts of knowledge that are still in development today. And then some people will say knowledge comes from something like faith or revelation. Maybe you think that you can get knowledge from a sacred text, or maybe you think that sometimes God speaks directly to people, or just reality speaks directly to people. Maybe you've had a sacred moment where you felt like God was leading you to do something, or maybe you've, I don't know, done ayahuasca in the desert and feel like you just understand something about reality that you didn't before. Both of those are sort of forms of revelation. And our question might be, okay, how legitimate are those forms of revelation? Can we actually learn something true about reality just by sort of changing our perspective and having some element or system or fabric of reality revealed to us? The next branch of philosophy is ethics. Ethics is theories of right and wrong, sometimes also called morality. We can use those words interchangeably. Theories of right and wrong. Right? How do I know what the correct way for me to behave in the world is? What consideration do I owe to other people? How should systems and institutions and governments be organized in order to promote justice, maybe? Is there such a thing as a just war? Right? So ethics, we will sort of have a brief exploration of this towards the end of the semester because it is important to sort of think critically about morality, right? And again, a big thing that spurs philosophy often is ethics, right? It's not just metaphysics for its own sake. I don't just want to know what's real just because I'm curious, but I want to know what's real and how I know about it because I need to know the right way for me to interact with reality. Ethics often spurs that move towards philosophy and critical thinking. The last traditional branch is aesthetics. Some of you answered the aesthetics question in the first discussion board, and I was happy to see those answers. Aesthetics is a tricky one, right? Aesthetics is traditionally theories of beauty, what makes something beautiful. But more recently, it's expanded to include things like just emotional experience and perception, right? I wouldn't call a horror movie, for example, beautiful in the same way I might call a sunset beautiful, but there's definitely an aesthetic dimension to it. We won't focus too much directly on aesthetics in this class, mostly because it's very difficult to fit into good critical thinking, but I do want us to sort of have it in the back of our minds. It is, in various interesting ways, related to these other three branches, ethics, epistemology, and metaphysics. All right, so we have these four words, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, aesthetics. I want these four words to be in the back of your brain just on recall automatically at all times. All right, so get them in there. When I ask a question about reality, I want you to say, oh, this is a metaphysical question. If I ask a question about how we know things, I want you to have epistemology in your head as sort of bookmarks for the domain of philosophy that we're focused on. All right, that is everything for now. This was a little bit longer of a video than I wanted, but hopefully it was worth it. I will see you all again very soon in the Introduction to Logic module.